the cloud. Okay, well, I'm going to pause. Everyone should have received an announcement that the recording has now been started for this meeting. This is the monthly meeting for the Jeffreys Point Neighborhood Association. It is Tuesday, October 10th. This meeting will be recorded, and the copy of the recording, although hosted on YouTube, is only available to be viewed on our website, which is www.jeffreyspoint.org. If you wish to keep your camera off, submit questions through the chat, and change your name as it is displayed, you are certainly welcome to do that. You are not required to be seen on the video or be heard. I'm currently looking for where to change the settings so that people can unmute themselves. I am not normally the person who is in charge of the settings, so it was taking me a quick moment to find it. If someone who has more experience than I do knows where that is, feel free to put that in the chat, and I will happily do that. I figured out how to change the chat, but not how to change muting and unmuting. So I apologize to everyone for this pause. Susan, can you check and see if you can unmute, please? No?
I'm able to.
Okay. Can you try again, Susan? Okay. Anyway, I'm going to introduce myself as we do want to keep moving forward. My name is Margaret Farmer, and I'm co-chair of the Jeffreys Point Neighborhood Association. Missing this evening is Andrew Pike, who is our treasurer. Unfortunately, was not feeling well. Also missing this evening is Josh Smith, who is our secretary. Carolina, why don't you introduce yourself? This is your first formal meeting, and that'll give me a second to keep looking for the setting. Oh, now it's not letting. That is crazy. Now is it working?
Now it's working. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Carolina Chorvath. I'm the newest member to the board, and I will be acting as one of the vice chairs. Thanks for having me.
Okay. And then we are joined this evening by Susan Huang, who is our wonderful new co-chair. As you may have remembered at the previous meeting, Rachel Blomer stepped off the board after several years of being a wonderful board member. And although we miss her and we're grateful for her, we are certainly glad to have both Carolina and Susan on the team. I just let people know that we are having a change to the agenda this evening. We originally had the Conservation Law Foundation planning to attend this evening to give some background on Chapter 91. Unfortunately, they were unavailable at the last second. We did put this out on the agenda, so I do apologize that the published agenda that you had access to is not correct. But they have committed to being here next month, as has the MBTA, to talk about the Blue Red Line connector. So we look forward to having that conversation with them. But we do apologize that the agenda that we published is unfortunately incorrect. A few announcements we have this evening. The Boston Parks Fall Fitness Series will offer free fitness classes from September 24th through November 4th. So they started in September and are going on now and will go through November. These are both in person and virtual and are led by certified fitness instructors. Everyone is welcome regardless of fitness level. The all levels family Zumba class will be held on Sundays at 11 a.m. at Noise Playground in East Boston. You can learn more and find the full schedule of classes at www.boston.gov/fitness. In addition to attending our meeting next month, the MBTA is having a meeting regarding the Red Blue Line connector. This public meeting will be held on Thursday, October 19th at 6 p.m. at the East Boston branch of the Boston Public Library on Bremen Street. We encourage everyone to attend, certainly ask questions, and then you can be more informed for our meeting next month. The East Boston Democratic Ward Committee is having their monthly meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, October 11th, from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on Zoom, 7 p.m. on Zoom. We highly recommend you check their website to RSVP and get the link to participate. The Ward Committee is also having a networking event community networking event on Tuesday, October 24th at Angela's in Orient Heights from 6 to 7:30. All are welcome. East Boston Main Streets is this Sunday, October 15th from 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And the streets, Bennington and Prescott, I don't quite understand the way it's written. I'm not sure I'm going to express this correctly, but there are several street closures around the Central Square area. Bennington and Prescott are closed to Meridian and London streets. We encourage you to check online to see the full listing of street closures. Keep in mind, when a street is closed, you cannot move your car off. So if you leave your car there, it may be there for the day. Also, the Saratoga Street Block Party is scheduled for Tuesday, October 31st from 4 to 8 p.m. A quick reminder that is the Halloween, and a reminder that children will be out and about trick-or-treating. We encourage people to do that and be out on the community and have a good time. We are planned to start this evening, as we do every evening, or as every monthly meeting, with our friends from the East Boston Police Station. However, I don't see them. If they are here, if they could, if we could see you, and then someone, by the way, thank you very much to Will, who put a link in the chat to the support about how to allow people to unmute themselves, which I will check as soon as we have the police here, but I do not see them. I'll give them one more second. And unfortunately, I do not see them. Click it. Meeting controls. Okay. Anyone else see? Susan, do you see them? Could you give me a thumbs up, thumbs down if you don't see if you see the police? Carolina, same. Okay, I don't see them. Moving on from the police, does anyone see? I'm looking for Manuela Villa Gomez, the mayor's liaison. She was invited this evening. She was unable to confirm. This may be the shortest meeting ever at the rate we're going. However, I do see Joey Ruggiero and Christina Rico from the BPDA, so I know that you're not getting out completely free. I do not see her as well. Okay. I'm going to move on. I should be able to Will with Cafe Gloria. Do you want to go next? Susan has your presentation slides. I'm going to click the button to get you to unmute. Let me know if that works, Will.
Worked on my end.
Okay, great. Go right ahead.
All right. Would you like me to share my screen, or were you guys going to be sharing the presentation on your end?
So Susan's going to be
there it is.
sharing.
Great.
Just go ahead and when you want her to advance, say advance. And she's happy to take care of that. Just to let everybody know that Cafe Gloria is a proposed cafe and espresso bar here in the Jeffreys Point neighborhood area. Next month, we will be holding a vote to support their petition for licensure. This particular meeting is meant to be informational and give people the opportunity to both ask questions and provide feedback. And then next month we will vote. But go ahead, Will, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for being here at the meeting. So just a little bit background, as mentioned, the proposed cafe will be going into the Jeffreys Point neighborhood at 287 Maverick Street. We're hoping to convert the current space to rezone from just a retail space to a restaurant, cafe, sit down with takeout. So here on your initial presentation screen, you have what our proposed logo is. Instagram, if everyone follows or doesn't, it's Cafe Gloria BOS. Concept obviously by me, Willie Saza. Phone number if you ever need to get a hold of me. But we can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So as mentioned, Cafe Gloria will be a coffee and espresso bar. There is a little bit of confusion of whether this will contain any sort of alcohol because of the word bar associated with what I'm trying to do. And there's actually no liquor license, no alcohol that's going to be in effect at the cafe. Merely the expression is so people can feel like they have a space to come and hang out and be within the community. Part of our initial research for the cafe was sort of filling the gaps and the voids in the neighborhood in Jeffreys Point in particular, and having a place where, especially during the daytime, where a lot of residents work from home nowadays, can kind of hang out, have sort of like an internet cafe sort of vibe, but they can also be amongst their own neighborhood and just a walk away from their homes in case they need to get out. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in East Boston, East Boston High School, class of 2009. So my hope was to provide an experience that I've been able to cultivate throughout over a decade of the restaurant and bar industry now back home, and obviously investing back in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So the concept itself, Cafe Gloria, as mentioned, a coffee and espresso bar. Will be working alongside some local roasters, importing our own particular coffee brand from my family's native country of Colombia, which we've already done a couple of dry runs on. We've roasted a couple of different beans and are sort of finalizing what we want to provide. And a huge portion of why this cafe exists was, along with the success of being in the restaurant and bar world, I did a lot of competitive bartending, and fortunately was able to place top 16 in the world in 2019 via Bacardi Legacy, which was a global cocktail competition pre-pandemic that kind of catapulted a lot of careers and allows you to really, tell your own story by way of a cocktail itself. So was able to succeed in that and place 10th in the world with that cocktail. So that was something that was great. As far as the USA was named via Bacardi the best cocktail in the US in 2019. So taking those flavors and that concept and telling my story is how the cafe came to be as a brick and mortar concept. A huge ingredient in the cocktail itself was coffee, and was native Colombian coffee as well. So that's how we landed kind of here now. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the brand, collaborating with Vimana Creative, which I've collaborated in the past a bunch via the bars that I currently operate. And I currently operate all of Ranjwan properties, which include Blossom Bar in Brookline, Birds of Paradise in Brighton, Ivory Pearl also in Brookline, and the Baldwin Bar in Woburn. Fortunately enough, I've been able to become a bigger part of that company and help them expand. So part of our branding, and anytime you see any sort of work when it comes to social media posts, or the hot sleeves or the cups or any branding itself, tote bags, apparel, is going to be in collaboration with Vimana. We can go next slide. And then just a little bit deeper dive into my history. Again, born and raised in East Boston, South American, Colombian background. I use a lot of that in the creations that I do get. One of my great achievements locally was in 2015 when I was able to get on Zagat's 30 Under 30. At that time, I was only 24, so I was the youngest person on that list, and just kind of catapulted my career from there. Had a lot of exposure to the beverage and food scene just globally, and this is how we were able to get to where we are now. My biggest sort of achievement up until this point was all in the cocktail related world, but I'd like to think that the way that I was able to find my partners for the cafe has been an amazing success. So I was able to partner with a company called New Market, and they're a crowdfunding platform. They particularly specialize in food and beverage. And the whole purpose of their platform is their contribution to anybody that wants to contribute is we return that contribution plus 20% over a 6-month period of time. Once the cafe is open, essentially whatever you did contribute to our campaign, you will receive back plus 20% for full credit and full use at the location once it is up and running. We were able to raise close to $40,000 on that campaign, and then luckily enough, again, my past successes allowed me to raise the rest of it, and now we're here ready to rezone and ready to build. So we can go ahead on the next slide. So coffee and espresso, and a big portion of food is going to be a huge part of what we provide as far as the product goes. So the coffee and espresso will try to use, modern and innovative techniques that fall in line with sort of what the cocktail world is doing, as far as creating our own syrups, making sure that our water and our ice is filtered in its proper way, have dairy alternatives, be, allergy conscious, and everything that a neighborhood local coffee shop would need. Food itself, it's going to be curated by, thousands and thousands of recipes that my mother has cultivated throughout the years. She's not a chef or anything like that by any stretch of the imagination, but we are seeking to do something a little bit more homey, a little bit more homegrown, and make it feel like you're, enjoying something in someone's living room as opposed to a mass-produced item or anything like that. So a lot of our food items are recipes that were created by my mother. We will hire some back of the house experts to sort of execute those at a high volume, but all the recipes and all the food aspect of things will be coming from my mother's side of things. So that being said, we are partnering with Broadsheet Coffee Roasters. They're out of Somerville, and they do have a great operation in which they are able to import particular coffee beans that are unroasted, and we are able to roast them to our likings once they do arrive. So I'll be working closely with them to have that sort of rotating selection of something special. And next slide, please. So some renderings that have already been a part of the process so far. This is what our vision is for the space. Fortunately, Joe the architect, or JTA, is the architect company that I'm working with, and they are able to provide these really great renderings of the space, sort of 3D models, and walk me through the whole process, where they were really able to sort of interpret my vision. The vision of the space is to keep it relatively homey and darker, warmer tones. There are a lot of big windows right in the front of 287 Maverick that can provide a ton of light into the space. So we wanted to sort of darken up the space a little bit so that it could intake that amount of light, and again, create that warm feeling. Lots of walnut wood tones with some grays and some blacks thrown in. The espresso machine itself will be partnering with Mavam, which is out of Seattle, Washington, and they do have a lot of patented ergonomic workflow stations that are unlike anything else that traditional espresso bars and coffee shops work with. But we will have essentially this exact same unit that you see here on the screen. It's a 3 group head unit, allowing us to provide not only great coffee and great product, but at a very quick pace, because we do have those 3 group heads. We can be sort of cranking out coffee at a very high rate, especially in a space this small where it's going to be a lot of grab and go. And next slide, please. So here's just a little sample menu for what we have planned. There are no, just a little bit into the infrastructure of the space. We are not planning on doing any sort of hood system. Everything will be steamed, and the kitchen will be merely a prep style kitchen for the beverage side of things. But that being said, while we did get approved to try to do a type 2 hood system, we're gonna start out with this style of menu with a lot of cold salads and rice bowls, which rice is fully steamed, and we won't need to provide any sort of ventilation for anything like that, because there will be no grease inducing equipment or grease being made or byproduct in the space itself. But the left side of the menu is really sort of going to be the focus on specialty coffee drinks. The Latte Gloria will be obviously our signature, with a couple other ones thrown in there. You'll more than obviously have your classic coffee drinks as well, lattes, espressos, or regular drip coffee. We're going to be doing a cold brew as well. We're going to venture into a packaged program where there will be a grab and go station as well, where we can have a lot of these specialty drinks that are already pre-canned or pre-bottled, and you can take them with you if you're in a little bit of a run. That middle section of the menu, that will be sort of our main focus for the savory food, which is our rice bowls, or as I knew them growing up, arroz con, which is just, means rice with. But having that base of a rice, we can pretty much top it with a bunch of different things that we can get from purveyors. So, very sort of straightforward. I guess the best way to relate it to is poke bowls, if you're familiar, just that, instead of us using a sashimi style fish or anything like that, we're going to try to do something a little bit more savory with the infrastructure that we do have. We'll have some sweets in there as well, flans, cookies, things of that nature. And then the right side of the menu on the ceviche side, that's really kind of up in the air right now. In a perfect world, I think this is where we would like the menu to be at the end of all of its inception, but that's gonna be kind of conducive or it's going to be based on how much equipment we can actually fit in the space. Right now, we do have a projected amount that will fit, and based on how popular the rice bowls and the salads are, there might not be room to have in a sort of like a ceviche bar setup. So this will be sort of the inevitable goal, but for now, we're going to kind of take that section and tinker it a little bit more as we go along. And then we'll have some teas and matcha as well. The salad section will be, in fact, a full salad bar, if you will. So for people that are looking for more of a greener alternative. And then some things that have come up. We did have our Butters meeting on October 4th with the city of Boston with Manuela. And the only, real thing that we've dove into since that meeting has been a concern that was brought up that was, very, very appreciative of the person who did bring it up, was we are going to try to do a lot of, Uber Eats and DoorDash or delivery services out of the cafe. And that bottleneck that can potentially get created at 287 Maverick is real. There's a lot of buses and just general traffic that come down that street from the Massport side, and it is a one-way as well. So in order to avoid that bottleneck, we are sending an email out to the parking clerk to see if we can potentially snag the first 2 parking spots directly in front of the cafe to have them be pickup drop off for food delivery drivers and things of that nature. So try to mitigate that bottleneck happening on Maverick Street itself. But other than that, we'll do our best to make sure that it doesn't become a bigger issue, especially during the school months, because Donald McKay is a block and a half away. So we know there's going to be
Will.
Yep.
We are hoping to take some questions from people. Could you just go into a couple of the kind of the hard details, like what are the hours, how many people do you see working here, things? Could you go into those really quickly, and then in 2 minutes we'll transition to questions, and people are welcome to submit questions in the chat while Will is finishing up his presentation.
Yeah, hours, we're looking at 7 to 7 Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then Saturday, Sunday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then as far as staff goes, we'll probably have 2 people in the kitchen area and 2 people in the front area executing those coffees and taking orders as well.
Are you ready are you ready for us to transition to questions?
Yep, go right ahead.
Okay. So we have a question in the chat of what is the proposed number of seats in the restaurant?
So legally it's a 16-person capacity, so there will probably only be 12 seats because we will have the 4 staff members, but capacity is 16. We'll try to have 12 seats.
Okay. Could you just clarify a little bit, because you said that you're hoping to have an area that people can can kind of hang out, and this is more of a relaxed kind of situation. But if you only have like 12 seats, that's really hard for people to stay, that's hard for people to stay for a period of time. Like you don't stay in business unless you like turn the tables over. Do you know what I'm saying? Could you just address that? And
yeah, sure. I mean, we're they're going to fill up quickly, I guess, is the best way to address that. And again, our hope is that there is going to be a revolving door of takeout and coffees to go and things like that. But the majority of the seating will be on a countertop, as mentioned, internet cafe style, where you can plug in your computer and link onto Wi-Fi and do some work from there. But that is, it will unfortunately be full very quickly if all goes well, for sure. Yeah, we're gonna have 2 or 3 two tops out on a dining room with somewhat of couch seating, but the majority of the seating will be on the espresso countertop itself.
And a question from the chat of how deep the sidewalk is, and do you, during the nice winter or during the nice weather months, are you interested in having sidewalk seating?
That would have been great, but unfortunately, the sidewalk seating is included with the capacity total. So we just wouldn't be able to have any seats out there via the fire department, because it would be included into that 16-person capacity. So the sidewalk is fairly large, and the property line does extend a little bit out into the sidewalk itself. I think there's like a 4-foot area that belongs to the 287 property, which we could set something up there, but there won't be any seating per se.
Okay. And I'm going to give it just a few seconds to see if anybody has any other questions in the chat. You have just a few seconds. Okay. Will, thank you so much for being here this evening. We appreciate you presenting. And just to confirm, you said it was 187 Maverick Street, correct?
287 Maverick Street.
287. Okay, excellent. So it's 280. Someone asks for clarification. Does the total capacity number include people in line and people seated?
It does, and we do have a sort of flow chart that if there were to be a line created, they're kind of forced to stay on the outside of the doors. So if that does become the case, we do have like what do you call it, dividers and then flow movers, so that people know that they have to kind of wait along the building side, which is what that proposed patio space, their potential patio space would be used for, as opposed to seats. People can kind of hang out and go in after if there is a crazy line or anything like that, hopefully.
Okay. Well, hopefully if you have people standing outside in the line, they won't count that towards your capacity. So
yeah.
Okay. Just gonna give like one more second, as someone did put a question in the chat in the last second. And Will, if people have any questions or would like to reach out to you to ask for any clarifying, can I ask you to put into the chat your contact information, and I will happily share that out.
Absolutely. Put that in right now.
That would be great. Thank you very much. And then excellent. While our next presenters are doing that, I will send that out. So up next, we have Plan East Boston. Plan East Boston has presented a few times in the past several months. Well, I would say actually in the past several years. To give a little bit of a historical context to it, Plan East Boston is meant to be a master plan. There was a master plan that was done in 2000 that was meant to cover 2000 to 2002. Unfortunately, 2010, there was no additional process to build a new master plan. And so because of that, and because of a variety of other reasons, this process was put in place. I'm going to say, I know that we were deep into it in March of 2020 when COVID hit. So I think that, am I safe to say that this has been ongoing for 4 years, Christina? You can just wave or thumbs up. Is it 4 or 5? It's 5 years. Okay. And involved in this, and for full transparency, there was a committee that was recruited to be a part of this process, and I was on that, along with several other members of the Jeffreys Point neighborhood community, 1 or 2 of whom I do see here this evening. At this point, I would say that the plan is close to a final draft. However, what we're going to do this evening is we're going to hear from Christina and Jay and possibly other members of their group, who are going to give us an overview and hopefully solicit feedback. I will say that the comment period is still open. So if for whatever reason, if, you know, we're going to address as many questions and comments as we certainly can. But if for any reason you have additional comments or would like to share your thoughts, we will capture the, sorry, there's a bit of a row going on behind me with a 4-year-old. We do encourage you to send those comments in, and we will share out their contact information in the chat as soon as we can. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina and Jay at this time. And we will share Will's information in the chat with everyone. Go ahead, Christina. You should be able to unmute.
Awesome.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. As Margaret said, my name is Christina Rico. I'm the neighborhood planner for East Boston and the project manager for Plan East Boston, which is a neighborhood-wide planning effort to update the master plan that was published in the year 2000. And our primary deliverables via this plan will be updates to neighborhood zoning, which was established in 1993. Neighborhood zoning predates even the neighborhood's master plan and is now 30 years old. And also short and long range improvements to the neighborhood's public realm, primarily focused on transportation. And so the plan has had 3 major phases. The first phase was establishing existing conditions that took place from 2018 through 2019, sort of the beginning part of 2020. And then we are in the sort of culminating phase right now, imagining the future, where we share draft recommendations for, you know, like I said, focus primarily on zoning and near and long range improvements to the public realm. We recently released a complete draft of all of our recommendations for the entire neighborhood. You can find that on our project website. I think some folks have been putting some information in the chat. Maybe Jay is able to put a link to the actual plan. I've brought it here with me tonight. My game plan was to focus on the spreads or the pages that primarily speak to the JPNA sort of geography. But I'm happy to talk about anywhere folks may have questions. The plan itself is organized into 3 big chapters, and the chapters kind of follow what we call character areas. So because East Boston is a big geography, thanks, Susan. Would you mind navigating to pages 41 and 42? I think it's PDF page number 23. Awesome. Thank you. Great. The document is organized into 3 main chapters, which we refer to as character areas. The first is neighborhood residential areas. The second is what we call squares and corridors. And the third is called waterfront and evolving industrial areas. JPNA is kind of unique in that you have a little bit of all 3 of those character areas. And so we can jump around if folks have specific questions, but I thought we'd start here with talking about the sort of core of the residential area and the recommendations for Jeffrey's point. So today, almost all of, sorry, I hope folks at this point are very familiar with what zoning is and does, but it primarily describes what and how much can be built in a specific area. Today, almost all of JPNA is contained within a single zoning subdistrict, I believe referred to as 3F 2000, meaning 3F stands for 3 family, 2000 describes the minimum lot size requirement for parcels in that subdistrict. And we are proposing some pretty significant changes to the way zoning is described, but the goal is that future zoning is basically allows for the size and types of buildings that exist in all residential areas in East Boston, but obviously Jeffrey's point. So we are shifting off of the 3F and shifting into what we call form-based code which focuses on the sort of total scale of allowed buildings. And you can see from the diagram on the left and the right, that's comparing the before and after zoning maps. We are proposing that most of Jeffreys Point fall into this category that we're calling EBR2. EB standing for East Boston Residential, and the 2 means actually nothing. It's, we're using these descriptors 1, 2, and 3 to sort of describe the different intensities. It's not a descriptor of height. It's not a descriptor of FAR. It's kind of the way actually base code works today. But most of Jeffreys Point would fall into this EBR2 subdistrict. And that basically allows for buildings like what we refer to as for most parcels. That means buildings would be kind of the 3-decker. That is a very familiar building type in the neighborhood. The largest parcels in that area would yield something like a 6-pack, which is basically like 2 triple-deckers that have been smushed together. But we are not increasing allowed height. And in some cases, you guys may have had recently sort of more interior to the neighborhood applications for larger scale development projects, but we really felt like we wanted to kind of hold firm on this commitment that we were really preserving the residential core of the neighborhoods. You can see that they're along Maverick Street here, that there's a strip, and I don't know, Susan, if you're able to zoom in just a little bit to that area. Thank you. You can see the primary difference here is actually along Maverick Street and along the edge of Marginal Street across from Pierce Park. That is a slightly darker color. If you scroll down a little bit, Susan, so that you can see the key, we are putting those districts into a temporary kind of bucket called MFR-LS. That bucket exists today. That's called multifamily residential / local service. It's in this bucket because there is other citywide rezoning efforts that are going on today. We identified through the community process that Maverick Street is actually quite different than the kind of core of the residential area of Jeffreys Point. And that, sort of over time and kind of prevailing community sentiment was that, it was worth sort of contemplating allowing slightly larger development to proceed in that area. And so recommendations for allowed height and the size of those projects will be forthcoming. But we can talk more about what specifically is imagined there. I did want to highlight here that we have already received comments. You'll notice that, I don't know, Susan, if you're able to mouse over the Marginal Street, that kind of going from left to right from Maverick Station, past the Pierce Park, which is highlighted in green, and then past the shipyard. You'll see that there's like a teeny tiny patch there of what we had previously proposed as MFR-LS in this version. We've already received, yes, thank you, perfect. We've already received some comments that ask that we reconsider specifically that patch of MFR-LS and that we recast that as part of the EBR2 subdistrict, which is the kind of residential subdistrict governing most of the neighborhood. Susan, if you don't mind zooming out just a tiny bit. So this page kind of neatly summarizes what is the most relevant zoning for the residential area of Jeffreys Point. If you go down one more page to the next page, thank you. These are the public realm improvements or recommendations that we have also included. And so you'll see that there is a lot of new or upgraded crosswalks proposed to Maverick Street, and also the same for Marginal Street, which today is a very challenging condition. I don't know the page number off the top of my head, but I just want to flag for folks that one other recommendation for public realm. Oh, you can see here. Right, policy considerations for better bike lanes on page 25. We also made recommendations for marginal street in the waterfront chapter, which proposed changing the profile of marginal street to create, yeah, exactly, to create better bike conditions. This is in part because waterfront access, you guys are so familiar with the waterfront access along the shoreline is not continuous. And so part of the master plan from the year 2000 imagined what was then called Waterfront Way along Border Street and Marginal Street to kind of compensate for the fact that the waterfront itself was not always consistently directly accessible. And so I can come up with another page number, Susan, for you, but maybe this would be a good time to pause and start to field questions before I get into any too deep detail on any one thing. I don't know, Margaret, how you would like to facilitate that. Unfortunately, I can't see if people have raised hands or if you've received questions via the chat.
Okay, absolutely. Can we, Susan, can we take down, yes, if we do get asked, we will ask to put the slides up. First question is, and Jay has moved, but I will hit the button for unmute him. Christina, can you clarify how a 6-decker would not be taller than a triple decker? Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know why sometimes I'm able to unmute myself and not. Sure, that's a great question. There is a maximum allowed height restriction, which is 3 stories. And so the only way to get 6 units onto the site would be if you were able to accommodate a slightly wider building, not necessarily a taller building. Does that make sense?
Okay. And then is there a plan to address parking needs with larger development and height?
Yes. So the broadest recommendation for reforming parking in the neighborhood right now is we have made adjustments to all off-street parking requirements that are based on BTD sort of updated guidance. But specifically for residential uses, the first thing that we're doing is that we are eliminating off-street parking requirements for buildings with 3 or fewer units. That's because if you walk around and look at most buildings, most 3-deckers do not have off-street parking. And so from like a preserving the built fabric that exists today, we feel like that's consistent with most of the historic fabric of the community. For buildings with 4 or more units, they would be required to have an off-street parking ratio of 1-to-1. So for every off-street or for every unit, they're required to have a single off-street parking spot.
Okay. We have a comment here. As a Maverick Street resident, I vehemently oppose large buildings. We are in a flood zone and buildings are already taking over the street with large new developments. So we were asked to share that. Then we do have a question. Can you please clarify the plan for Marginal Street? How will loss of parking on Marginal Street be addressed with this new plan? And do you want you or Jay?
I'm happy to take it. I just want to scroll down to give a page number so that we're looking at a section or plan view of Marginal Street. Susan, would you mind navigating to PDF page number 73, which is annotated as pages 141 and 142 in the plan? She's a lengthy document. Great, thank you. And if you wouldn't mind zooming into the sections there that you see on the right, there's an existing and a proposed condition. Great. So in this concept, there would be a loss of parking on one side of Marginal Street. So primarily on the Park Street side. We're aware of some plans related to new phases of the Pierce Park that would include off-street parking associated with the park. I can't tell you how many spaces are being provided through there and how many could conceptually be lost in this concept, but the parking would be preserved. You see on the residential side of Marginal Street. And then traffic calming measures like speed bumps would be installed, and you can see some extended kind of crosswalk conditions there for improvements to pedestrian visibility, as well as the shared use path being created on the park side. I'm trying to put my best Nick Schmidt hat on right now, who is the transportation planner for East Boston.
Okay. And do you have an idea of how much, I'm going to assume that this was meant to be, as it was asked by the same person, that it was meant to be a follow-up of this. So I'm going to address this and then we'll go to some other questions that have come in. Do you have an idea of how much parking would be lost on Marginal Street?
No,
It's
a good
strain
question.
on our already strained neighborhood parking situation. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. No, particularly the public realm improvements for Plan East Boston are kind of vetted for their highest level feasibility and are not designed projects. So were these to be taken up by the Department of Public Works and Boston Transportation Department, those are the two departments who are responsible for implementing things like this. There would be continued public engagement around that and a refinement of the concept that would include greater detail, like accounting of, how many parking spaces are there today and how many could be lost.
And next question, do 3 stories under this plan exceed 35 feet?
We are proposing to shift away from having 2 different measurements. Right now you have kind of a belt and suspenders approach. So no, hypothetically, no, it would not exceed 35 feet, but we propose to eliminate one standard of measurement because we're seeing that can be quite a confusing requirement to have 2 different measurements for height.
Okay. We're going back to Marginal Street. Would the parking loss on Marginal be along the entire length of the street?
No. And I think maybe what I did a poor job of explaining earlier is that another thing to consider is that this concept would really terminate at the entrance to the shipyard. We want to prioritize these kind of key corridors that are connecting high pedestrian traffic routes. And we know, obviously, the shipyard is a destination. So this is really about making a meaningful connection from the terminus of the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway and, kind of where people are coming from Maverick Station to the shipyard.
Okay. And then also on Marginal Street, why could this not have been addressed sooner? The new Pierce Park sidewalk could have been pushed back to widen the street without losing parking.
Yeah, I get the question often about why Plan East Boston as a whole didn't happen sooner. Why the zoning reform, why any of the transportation concepts, all of that stuff. We agree these are needed improvements soon. And yeah.
Okay. Are there concerns about traffic with the new zoning / parking, especially as it pertains to Marginal Street with its additional bike lanes? For context, Marginal already deals with large trucks going to and from the shipyard. something that is expected to get worse as the shipyard begins expansion and or construction.
Was the question about traffic writ large or the questions about traffic on Marginal Street?
I would say both. About traffic within the addition of bike lanes in general and in particular on Marginal Street.
I mean, the hope is that this would have no impact to traffic on Marginal Street. We're not proposing to reduce the number of lanes, so it's not really going to reduce the throughput capacity, of Marginal Street. The question of traffic in the community writ large is an important one. And I think that I'm wishing a lot that Nick Schmidt was here, our transportation planner, to maybe answer any specific technical questions that folks might have about impacts to traffic in the community.
Okay. Has a traffic study been done for any parts of Jeffries Point? And if so, where and will one be conducted?
Some amount of traffic analysis was conducted back for the entirety of the neighborhood back in 2019 when we did our existing conditions report. Jay, I see that you're able to unmute yourself now. I cannot see if you're raising your hand or not to speak, though.
I'm not. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I don't know. It doesn't seem. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I did not raise my hand. I'm happy
okay.
to drop a link in the chat for the existing conditions report if that's helpful, though.
That would be helpful. And if folks have any specific questions about the results of that analysis, we'd be happy to follow up.
I also dropped a couple links into the chat about who to email for comments, where to find this document, where the Planning East Boston website is. So I know that has been shared out broadly to this group. So please feel free to utilize those links and send comment emails to either myself or the Planning East Boston general feedback email address. The comment period is open until the end of the month, and we are likely to actually extend that. So stay tuned for a mini extension. But if anyone already receives our email address, you would be notified of something like that. If anyone wants to put their email in the chat or funnel it through Margaret to me, I'm happy to add you to our email listserv as well.
Okay. Did you want me to go on to the next question, or did you want to comment?
I don't have a comment. I will share the existing conditions report. As Christina mentioned, there were some type of traffic analysis done neighborhood wide. And in the existing conditions report, if you go to the appendix or the transportation section, there is a extensive amount of infrastructure or transit information in there. So we find that helpful. We hope you found that helpful. If anyone wants to follow up with a specific transportation inquiry, like Christina mentioned, Nick is not here with us tonight, our transportation planner, but we're happy to get answers to those questions if there are any.
Okay. Someone has asked me to share that it is frustrating that widening the street, Marginal Street, could have been addressed earlier without losing parking by cutting into the News Pierce Park. I understand that as well. Going on to the next question. Is the reason for parking removal on Marginal in order to allow trucks into the shipyard have an easier time going down the street? So Christina and Jay, like if you mute yourself after unmuting yourself, I then have to like give you permission to unmute yourself. So don't mute when you're done. Just let it sit.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
The question is about encouraging trucks on Marginal Street.
Well, was the decision to remove parking on Marginal Street made in order to allow trucks to have an easier access to the shipyard?
No.
Which came first?
No, the discussion about what can happen in the sort of limits of the public right of way was not, I mean, we recognize that, of course, Marginal Street is an important truck route, and it would remain that way in this proposed concept. The changes proposed in the profile would be to accommodate the two directional shared use path that you could see highlighted in brown color.
Okay.
And if I can just add, we
Yes,
would not, the comment about, a desire for the Pierce Park 2 location to be kind of shortened to widen Marginal Street, that would not be something that the city of Boston would be able to do. Massport owns and controls their land, and the city would not be able to ask Massport or have any control over Massport property to widen the street and impact any of their property. So I just want to make a clarification about that.
Next question on there. The previous master plan included concepts and agreement for the creation of the Greenway, as well as other visionary ideas for the current residents of East Boston. This particular plan doesn't even include an agreement from the BPDA to protect the current Greenway with a moratorium on development. Can you comment why these things were not included or thought of?
Sure. I mean, obviously I have a very biased perspective as one of the sort of primary contributors to the plan from the concept of actually writing it and drafting it. We are not able to put a moratorium on private development. That's just not something that this administration or previous administrations have expressed interest in doing that. So a single planning initiative is definitely not able to stop private development from proceeding in a neighborhood. We did specifically include recommendations that would impact development along the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway. Today, many of those properties are located in a zoning subdistrict called Corridor Enhancement. We are proposing to do two things. One is that today, for projects that are accessing PDAs or planned development areas, which is a special overlay district, today there are no dimensional limitations for projects pursuing PDAs in the Corridor Enhancement Subdistrict. We are proposing new dimensional requirements that do not exist, specifically to address concerns about development along the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway. And the second is that for the portions of the Corridor Enhancement Subdistrict that have already been turned into open space, we want to codify that from a zoning perspective and take them out of the Corridor Enhancement Subdistrict and put them into an open space subdistrict. As for visionary concepts that were part of the 2000 master plan and how we carry forward some of those here, concepts like Waterfront Way along Marginal and Border Street, we went a lot further, frankly, than the 2000 master plan in terms of concepts for the public realm. I invite folks to look at public realm improvements to Day Square, proposed to Day Square, which frankly almost start from scratch. Today, Day Square is not really a place that people would kind of go as like a neighborhood destination. I don't even know that there's a bench there for you to sit on if you frequented one of the many businesses that are in that area. And we were able to reclaim a lot of space by simplifying intersections and reducing the kind of total amount of road in that area. And we did that in very close partnership with our friends at BTD. It would also create a new MBTA station in the heart of Day Square connected to the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway, bringing SL3 service, which today bypasses the community entirely, into the heart of Day Square. there are many concepts like that in the plan. And so if folks have not had a chance to read through it, I know it's a lot to ask. It's a long document, but we felt like we have spent a long time talking to the community about the recommendations contained within. And as Jay said, certainly welcome continued feedback.
Okay. Do the changes proposed in the plan include buildings that would create a commercial space at the ground level? And if so, part 2, does having commercial space at the base of the building change building requirements?
To the first question, does the plan provide for buildings with ground floor commercial uses? I would say yes, resoundingly. So the hope is that step 1 is that we would allow basically what exists today, which is that East Boston has many examples of corner stores that don't exist in the heart of the kind of main square location. I can think of many examples of like dry cleaners, coffee shops, very small restaurants, like, you know, that exist everywhere in the neighborhood. And so step 1 is to allow by right that kind of corner store condition in all residential areas. We would propose to limit the total gross square footage of commercial use in a residential area. So you're not getting something like a large restaurant or, you know, like a really large commercial facility. But we think that corner stores are a good thing. And we heard pretty consistently through the plan that most East Bostonians wanted increased access to stuff like that. Step 2 is that in strategic kind of squares and corridors that we are really doing the most to encourage those active ground floor uses, like retail spaces, and prohibiting inactive uses. And so, yeah, we think that, you know, things like parking, off-street parking, an important kind of requirement, but that shouldn't be taking up the kind of majority of the ground floor front along major streets. And then your second question, Margaret, I think was how does that affect allowed building dimensions?
How does having a commercial space at the streetscape level of a building change building requirements?
I think the only one is there's kind of a limit on the total amount of gross square footage a commercial space could have in a residential area. All the other dimensions remain the same. Commercial spaces also have off-street parking requirements. The total building form wouldn't be allowed to change. So it's not like just because you have a ground floor commercial use, that doesn't mean that you then get 3 additional floors on top of it. It's still, you know, a maximum of 3 stories, whether that first story is a residential unit or if it's a coffee shop. It stays the same.
Okay. Can you speak to other ways that this plan promotes or encourages mass transit and or alternative transportation to cars?
Yes, I mean,
you don't have to go through all of them, but just from like a strategic, you know, from like I'm gonna edit this a little bit and say from like you know, I don't want to go through every street, but like from a strategic point of view, you talked about the SL3. That's a significant change in terms of access to public transportation. Are there any others like that?
Yes, we proposed high frequency bus lanes. So that means bus only service. 2 directions on Meridian Street, connecting Meridian Street to Central Square for priority bus service identified by the bus network redesign project led by the MBTA. And we also identified dedicated bus lanes on Chelsea Street all the way up to the Chelsea Street Bridge, creating basically like a queue jump for people who are taking buses. And then, of course, I think the last spread that we were looking at was the better bike connections. We sort of took a good look everywhere in East Boston and tried to identify places where we could prioritize the creation of both on-street and off-street bike network connections, and make sure that it's a complete network, that we're not leaving anyone stranded with kind of like a clear route out and no route back. Does that, Margaret, do you feel like that answers the question, or?
I think it addresses it. And now I'm actually going to ask a question.
Sure.
The East Boston Harbor Walk has parts of it that are absolutely gorgeous and in excellent condition and connect to other pieces, and then has large sections. I'm thinking mostly by the Shaws, but there are quite a few others that exist that really stop the linkage of the Harbor Walk going from the Hyatt all the way around to the Chelsea Creek. Is there anything in this plan that would address or encourage or otherwise protect the access of the general public to the harborfront?
That's a great question. I feel like you're baiting me. And maybe only because you're chapter
I'm not
91.
that's not my intention. Like my intention is
No.
to hit
Yeah.
like a broad category that
Yeah.
like there are people here who are going to read this plan and read everything, and there are
Mhm.
people that this is the only thing they're going to learn about the plan. So so my hope was that like that is a thing that has a huge impact, or has a potential to have huge impact on current residents. So that
Yeah.
I'm not intending to bait you. It's to like, hey, this is something we haven't hit yet.
No, it's a great question. So yes, but there's very little that we can do about it, because in East Boston, it's kind of a unique neighborhood that much of the waterfront is actually regulated by the state. And I like to call this regulatory lasagna that happens when there's like layers on top of layers, which is why I thought, because you guys had chapter 91 folks who were supposed to be here with you tonight, that this was like kind of a plant. But our challenge is that actually much of East Boston's waterfront, the portions basically that you were just describing, Margaret, like behind the Shaws, almost all of Condor Street, almost all of the Chelsea Street Bridge area, the Route 1A corridor, all of that is in what is called a designated port area, or a DPA. And that is a state level regulation that actually is administered by the Office of Coastal Zone Management. It's within the Office of Environment in the state. And in addition to requiring essentially only water-dependent industrial uses, it actually prohibits the creation of publicly accessible open space, specifically the kind of shoreline open space that you're talking about. So you're basically allowed, because it protects ship to shore transfer of goods. It kind of imagines the purpose of establishing a designated port area is to protect the very limited geography that the region has for water dependent industrial uses. And obviously ship to shore transfer would be a very important kind of physical feature of a water dependent industrial use. And so that means that inviting the public to like walk along the shore would kind of infringe on the feasibility of that physical feature. And so that's why you see where East Boston has designated port areas, DPAs, you basically see the end of the Harbor Walk, and then you'll see it pick back up where the DPA is not, and then you'll see it end again where there's DPA. So the Harbor Walk is fragmented in East Boston. And concepts like what we talked about tonight for Marginal Way, there's also concepts in here for Border Street and Condor Street, kind of have to pick up where the DPAs terminate to create consistent, connected public access as close to that waterline's edge as possible. And frankly, that last line is often the public street before you hit private property that's then regulated by these DPAs. We did, as part of earlier phases of the plan, embark upon a boundary review for both the East Boston DPA, that's the Inner Harbor DPA that covers most of the Border Street properties, and a Chelsea Creek DPA boundary review. But they both of them yielded very small changes ultimately to the boundary. And so until there is kind of state level legislation, the harbor walk sort of is what it is.
You're going to revisit that in a few minutes, actually. But we're going to change the subject for just a little bit because I do want to make sure I address this question is, can you clarify how you've received community feedback that has led to the creation of this particular plan throughout the process? Did you mute yourself by accident? You did. Here. There you go. There you go. There you go. You should be able
I'm
to
so
talk.
sorry. It's like a reflex now because it's like part of Zoom etiquette to mute yourself when you're not talking. Apologies, folks. So yes, we solicited community feedback starting in 2018. You know, Margaret, you talked about being a member of the 20-person advisory group. We have done many roadshows to neighborhood and civic associations like this convening. We had both formal and informal in-person engagement events leading up to the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. Those engagement events included pop-ups where we like brought popsicles and hung out in the Greenway. We brought popsicles and hung out in Lopresti Park. We had nights in restaurants. We had pupusas with a planner, pints with a planner events. We had neighborhood walking tours that were organized by civic and neighborhood associations to kind of do like walk and talk events. And we also had more traditional in-person workshops where we had kind of, you know, a presentation and then, you know, sort of facilitated dialogue. I know it's hard to remember what it was even like back in 2020 when we did that stuff. And then sort of post COVID-19, a lot of our engagement has been conducted virtually, although we do try to make ourselves available to hard to reach populations via in-person engagement on a kind of more targeted basis.
Okay. And I thought we were going to get a few more quick. So just to do a quick time check, it is 8:18. We would like to, and I do see that our numbers are steadily declining as we are getting later in the evening, which we do understand. We are grateful to everyone for being here. I'm going to ask this question, and then I'm actually going to repeat in the chat how people can continue to submit comments. And I'm going to ask Jay if he could put into the chat what the current deadlines are for submitting comments. I don't want people to think that, oh, this will get extended and then it's currently not agreed to. But going back to the comment we had before, the conversation that we had before about Chapter 91, what can we as a community do to bridge the gap? Oh, sorry, somebody submitted something. What can we as a community do to bridge the gap in the community, city, and state communications and planning? As it exists currently, it punishes the neighborhood and is outdated to our current modern needs.
That is a big question. I wish I knew the answer. I would say that we are in close dialogue with our state partners, whether that's Massport or the Office of Coastal Zone Management, the administrators of the DPA policy. But I think that's, you know, CZM, I think is frankly well aware of the challenges that DPAs put on local communities. I think because they sort of, in a way, by their very nature, kind of prioritize the regionalness of a place. You know, it says like, you know, within the state, there are kind of limited opportunities for water dependent industrial uses. It's a shrinking geography. And so where it existed in the 1970s, we want to protect it. And so that kind of thinks about East Boston's shoreline from a perspective that is very macro versus the lived experience of local communities like Margaret said, I want to be able to walk along the water behind Shaw's, but it's pretty dilapidated back there. You really wouldn't want to do that. So, CZM's aware of that, and I think they're going through processes to update what the regulations do and don't allow, to kind of strike a better balance between the feedback, that we get at the neighborhood scale versus what the state level needs really are. But East Boston faces that kind of regional versus local challenge on every sort of front. It's kind of unique in that way. It's like every traffic conversation I have is like, well, every person commuting from the North Shore does it straight through the heart of your neighborhood, or every person trying to get to Logan Airport does it through like virtually every connection Eastie has, physical connection Eastie has to neighboring communities. And same for land uses, frankly, like CZM and the water dependent industrial uses. So I think that in part, that's what takes planning so long, in part. The pandemic didn't help.
No, it did not help. I do want to just remind people that we did have concert. By the way, CZM is, could you explain to people, when you've said CZM several times, but could you explain what that is?
It is the Office of Coastal Zone Management, and it's the state level authority within the Office of Environment that regulates land uses in designated port areas, or DPAs.
And just to remind everyone, we did have, and however, considering the amount of time we've spent on this, it's kind of worked out that we didn't. We did have the Conservation Law Foundation scheduled for this evening to give us a primer on Chapter 91. There have been several issues that the JPNA, along with former board member Mary Cole, has been working on regarding Chapter 91, and we want to keep you up to date on what's going on. At the same time, we want to make sure that we've given everyone as many tools as possible to participate in that conversation. Can you type into we had a request to ask you, Christina or Jay, if you could type out the meaning of those acronyms in the chat so that we could share them with people who wish to do some Googling on their own. That is the last question we currently have. I'm going to make a couple of announcements and wrap up while we, so that I can give people a chance to put anything else in the chat that they would like. A quick reminder that this meeting is so much fun that if you wanted to come back next month, you could. And that we will be meeting again on Zoom next month on Monday, November 13th. And then in December, we will be in person for our December holiday gathering, and that will be at the Jeffries Point Yacht Club. We have received permission from them, so we will be gathering there in person. I know a number of people who are currently on, I see your names, have stated in the past that they'd like to gather in person to see each other. And so this is a great opportunity to do that. A reminder that the notes from this evening, the approximately 8 pages, as of this moment, will be posted on our website, www.jeffriespoint.org, along with a copy of the recording for this particular meeting. As soon as they are ready, probably by sometime, I would say next Monday, we may be able to post the video earlier, but it will take a couple of days to catch up on the notes. I was able to put into the chat that Coastal Zone Management is CZM, and most of Jeffries Point and East Boston, it is in the DPA, the designated port area. The current deadline for submitting plan documents is October 27th. There may be an opportunity for that to be extended, as Jay explained to us earlier, but it is currently October 27th, so I encourage people to put that in at this time. Not seeing any additional comments or questions, I am going to say thank you to everyone for attending here this evening. This plan is going to be in place and is going to dramatically impact our neighborhood, and it could be in place for the next 10 to 20 years. The last one was supposed to be 10, but it wound up being 20. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone for joining us this evening, and let you all know that if you need any help or assistance from us, we're available at board@jeffreyspoint.org. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. I'm going to stop the recording.